Hello everybody, in this video what we're going to be doing is creating the ultimate media server. This is an updated video to my original kind of Proxmox ultimate walkthrough series part 2, and this is my follow-up to our updated part 1. What you can see here, this is my GitHub repository. In the last video we covered everything here in storage, all the way from actually creating our very first Proxmox machine and the node, creating all the storage, going over some tips and tricks to get everything working right, and of course actually setting up our network shares so we can access all of our files throughout our home network from Proxmox. What you can see if we head over here to our PvE guide server, we have 100 media, which is everything that we created in the last video. So this is kind of our starting point right here. And for this one, we are primarily going to be focusing on, if I scroll all the way to the top here, actually head over to media server. We're going to be going over everything in this. Since our last part 2 video, there have been a ton of updates, partially big thank you to you guys who've submitted issues, who've contributed to this documentation that I have been building. There's a lot here, including all kinds of tips and tricks if you run into any issues. There's a whole bunch of different things here that you can do to troubleshoot and fix things if you run into anything. And of course, this is all open, and I strongly encourage you to contribute to it if you find any better things to do, better methods, better applications. It's all open for suggestion. Now, last time we focused on Plex, and due to some recent announcements and actions from Plex, it's really hard for me to endorse that product as vigorously as I previously did. So we are going to be focusing on Jellyfin this go around. Granted, I will have this Plex folder here if you prefer to install that, but the process for installing Jellyfin versus Plex is almost identical. Almost. Also, in comparison to the last video, we're going to be following more best practices, so to speak. So if I actually head over to my main Proxmox instance, I am not following best practices. Right here, I have an unprivileged LXC that runs my Jellyfin and Plex media servers, as well as a bunch of Docker containers that we will be setting up in this video. You can go ahead and do all this on an LXC if you actually want to. Go to the chapters and just start at the Jellyfin installation and run it on the exact same 100 LXC that we initially created. If you do decide to do that, there are going to be some extra things that you want to do that we're not going to necessarily cover in this video, but are in the documentations here, such as right here, running unprivileged LXC. You're going to want to follow these steps to get Quicksync to working. In this video, we're going to be doing just about everything that runs Docker within a VM, and we're going to mount the storage shares that we created in the last video directly into that virtual machine. And again, even with Jellyfin and Plex, I do recommend just setting this up with Docker. You seem to run into the less issues with permissions and things like that. But I, of course, do have all the steps here if you want to do a direct system installation, if you want to go about it that way, including how to change how or the user and group that your service is running on, changing all the permissions for the right directories, so on and so forth, including hardware transcoding, which we just kind of covered. I ran a poll on YouTube asking you guys if you kind of do it my way with just all the Docker containers on the LXC, or if you do it the kind of Proxmox recommended way, and it was pretty split, but the general consensus is when I make the actual guide, I should follow best practices. So that's what we're doing. If you're not going to follow best practices, you can go ahead and skip all the VM stuff using the chapters down below. Now, before we go ahead and move on to setting everything up, we need to give a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with a wide depth of creative topics. Thousands of classes and categories ranging from beginner to advanced, including illustration, design, animation, film, photography, entrepreneurship, and more. And speaking of more, the kind of thing that I've been focusing on lately is classes on productivity, something I definitely need to improve on. Even though it's kind of specific to artists, the Learn to Be Productive class is one that I've been doing, and it's pretty cool. There's also the MKBHD one on creating YouTube videos like this, and just so much more. There are literally thousands of classes, so if there's a specific niche or anything, including all the way down to like Python and C++ coding, there's something there for you. Skillshare is designed by creatives for creatives with a ton of industry experts that actually teach these classes. And of course, everything is on demand and modular, so you can do everything at your own pace. And better yet, the first 500 people that use my link down below will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare today. So, and actually setting up that VM is a pretty easy process. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is head over to whatever storage that you use to store your ISO images. And we're going to want to download Ubuntu server or whatever Linux kind of server operating system that you're most comfortable with, whether that be Fedora, Arch, whatever. So over here we have Get Ubuntu server. That's the operating system I am most comfortable with and have the most experience with. So I am going to click on download and right click on download now, copy the link, and then head back over to Proxmox under local ISO images, and I'm going to download from URL. Paste in that URL we just copied, which will download the Ubuntu ISO file directly to Proxmox. So let's click on download and let that do what it needs to do. Which now, depending on your internet speed, you will have time for a water break. Out of anything we're doing today in this video, hydration is the most important. So with the ISO downloaded, we can now create our virtual machine. So I'm going to click on Create VM right up here on the top. You can name it whatever you like. I like Serve R because it's going to have all my R applications, as well, of course, all the media server stuff. So we're going to go next. For OS, we're going to pick the Ubuntu image and go next. And then under System, we basically can keep just about everything the same here. All the default settings are great, so we're going to go next. Now here we have disks. Now this disk isn't really going to house too much stuff. All of our media is on the other LXC. Depending on how you set it up, your Docker configurations and all that might be over there as well. So just for a little wiggle room, I'm going to give myself 64 gigabytes on this server, mostly for those Docker images and whatnot. So we could go next. CPU, I am going to give it, boom, 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 6 cores. At least 4 is kind of recommended for all of this stuff. And then memory, we're going to pump this up to 8 gigs. So 8192 is about 8 gigs of RAM. That's a real nice number. And then for our network, we're just going to keep the default bridge and all that. Click next and then confirm that. So let's hit finish. And then it will create our virtual machine there. So we have our little Ubuntu server here ready to install. Before we actually dive in there real quick, I do want to give it to our Intel GPU that's built into our CPU, our Intel Quicksync, because we're going to need that to set up hardware transcoding here. And I will note that if you don't have a Intel CPU in your system that supports Quicksync, getting an Intel Arc GPU is kind of what I recommend. I'm not going to dive into the steps for doing this with NVIDIA or AMD. The Jellyfin documentation has a really great information and instructions on how to get all that going. This is going to be focusing on Intel, and I'll leave links in the documentation to the specific steps from Jellyfin for AMD and Intel. So to add that, we're just going to go over here to hardware before we go ahead and start it up, and we're going to add a PCIe device. We're going to go over here under raw device, and for me it is right here, the Intel Alder Lake with the Intel graphics. Yours might be a different number, it might show up differently, but it does usually specify that it's going to be the graphics chipset there. We're going to enable all functions and then click on add. So now we're passing through those capabilities directly to the VM so we can set up hardware transcoding a little bit later, which is completely free on Jellyfin. And that's all we really need to do for the kind of pre-setup stuff. Let's go ahead and start this and get Ubuntu server installed. So if I jump over here to the console, we're going to install or try our Ubuntu server, and then we're into the Ubuntu installation stuff, and this is a pretty straightforward thing. I'm going to select English. The keyboard layout stuff looks good. Usually it's not necessary, but if I go ahead and search for third-party drivers, that might be helpful. Let's go done. And here you have your network setup stuff. So this is going to be the IP our router just kind of gives it automatically, ending in 120, which for me is fine. Generally, I like to kind of match these up with the server IDs, but this is just a guide, and that IP address is taken, so I'm not going to do that. We don't need a proxy. It's going to go ahead and scan our mirrors, which it seems to be working, so our network is going to be fine. So we could hit done here, And now right here, I do change something. This is just a VM. I don't really want to set this disk up as an LVM group. I just kind of want standard access to all the storage without any weird partitioning. So let's go ahead and hit done. And then there we go. It's going to install everything just on the root mount point, which we can see up here. And from there, we could click on done. So now it's going to wipe everything and start the installation so we could continue and then set up our accounts right here. So my name, our server name or the host name. So I just kind of match this with servar, give ourselves a username and then give yourself a moderately decent password and then click on done. We are not going to use Ubuntu Pro. Right here, we're going to want to, with this kind of flashing there, hit the space bar to install our OpenSSH server. So then we can log into it with a terminal. Makes it much easier to copy paste commands and all that. So we will hit done. It's going to scan for third-party drivers. There are none, so we'll continue. Here, this might be tempting to go through and install things, but most of these are going to be kind of with snap packages. Would not recommend, so skip all that, hit done, and it is going to finish installing for us. Again, another great time. Drink some water. Hey, there we go. When we see the reboot now option show up, all we do is reboot it now, and soon we will be in our new installation. And before it reboots, we can actually remove that USB, or not USB, the ISO. So right here, let's just click remove. Yes, there we go. And then hit enter to continue the reboot process. If we go in here, oh, it's still there. Let's do a reboot directly through Proxmox. Yes, there we go. Now to the console, we are in. So if I just log in real quick directly through here before we open up SSH, make sure our networking is working fine, which you can see right there. It's at the IP 120 that we set up. So now we should be able to head on over here directly into a terminal and SSH into the user we created at that IP address. Hit enter. Yes, this is my server. Type in our password and just like that, we are in. So whenever you are first in any Linux installation, it is always a good idea to update it. So sudo apt update, as well as a sudo apt upgrade. Hit enter, type in that password again, and there we go. We have a bunch of packages. Let's hit enter to update all of those. And there we go, we're all updated. And I noticed when I first logged in, I did actually get a little warning here. A bash warning, set locale cannot change. So luckily the internet is our very best of friend. So we will fix it. Let's install locales. It's already in there. So we should be able to just generate those. There we go. Now we ran a lot of updates. So real quick, one last time, I'm going to reboot we're going to reboot our server. And then once we see it back online, we are going to log back into it with SSH. There we go. No warnings. Everything's up to date. Life is looking good. So again, we're going to be doing a lot of this through Docker. And luckily there is this beautiful website called TechHut.tv that has this wonderful kind of getting started guide with Docker. If you have no experience with Docker, I do recommend you go through and reading this. It goes over the installation process, managing non-root users, and of course basic Docker usage and like the essential commands that you're going to need to know to actually run Docker, which if you don't know is just, it's a containerization platform that makes it really easy to spin up a variety of different applications, web services, and all of that. So then we're not having to install things directly onto our host system and having to mess with like systemctl services all the time and things like that. And right here we have a little git docker. So we are going to curl this little script here right into our home directory. So we have the git docker sh, and if we run that with sudo sh, this is going to install and set up the entire Docker environment and all the packages that we're going to need. Little thing is just installing random or running random scripts on your Linux machines generally isn't a good idea. It's important to go through and kind of make sure that they're trying to cause any harm on your system. This is directly from docker.com, so it's going to be safe. So let's go ahead and run that. Type in our password, and then there it goes. And now when we run Docker commands, we don't want to always have to use sudo, so we're going to add our user to the Docker group. And you could just use this command right here. If you used the script to install, you're not going to need to do the group add. So we're just going to paste in this command, sudo usermod ag docker, and then our current user. So hit enter, I've been added. And now if I just run a new grp and then Docker, it's going to refresh that. And now I am part of the Docker group. Now from there, earlier we mentioned hardware transcoding. I want to make sure that first the devices are there. So we can just run a ll, which is a long list command to see all the files, permissions, and everything like that. So if I run ll, the actual devices are going to be in dev, DRI, hit enter. And we can see we have card 0, card 1, and the renderer, which this renderer right here is going to be our best friend. That is how we're going to use Intel Quicksync. So if I head back into my documentation for setting up Jellyfin and I go down to the hardware transcoding section under Ubuntu setup, so my user has the ability to actually use hardware transcoding, I am going to add myself first to this Docker group. So boom. Or not Docker group, the renderer group, which we can see is associated with the actual renderer or the Intel Quicksync. And now just to ensure that everything's working, we are going to install the Intel GPU tools. This will also install drivers and some other helpful things. So sudo apt install Intel GPU tools. And you can see right there all the various packages that it's going to be installing. So we're going to run that. And now to see if it's recognizing our GPU or our Intel CPU graphics, we can run Intel GPU top. And I do believe I have to run this as a sudo user. So hit enter. And there we are. We can see Intel Alder Lake. Whoa, card 1. Beautiful. Everything's looking good. So Control C to get out of there. So now for storage. Now previously we did this thing where we mounted virtual drives in a variety of LXC containers. This time we're not doing that with a VM. Really the best way to go about this is to just directly mount our network shares we created in the previous video. So if we head over here, we have the LXC and the VM. In here in our last video, we created our shares, which if I log in, we did that under the nano, probably sudo nano samba SMB configuration. You can see we have the shares for data and Docker here. Now real quick, I'm going to interject for a moment because after some trial and experimentation, I come to realize that Jellyfin, a few other containers, do not like it when you put the configurations in a network share. It's primarily a MySQL or SQLite problem, whatever, that's fine. So we're going to be putting all of our Docker stuff just on the actual virtual machine, but we still need to add the data from our network share with all of our media and all that. And generally how I go about this here, if I'm in the media folder in this documentation, I like to put everything in a data folder just like this, in which I have my movies, music, TV shows, downloads, and all of that. So what I'm gonna do real quick is make that folder, and I do it right in the root. So if I do a sudo make directory, and I'm going to make the data directory just like this, hit enter, and now if I ls the root, you could see we in fact have a data directory right there. Beautiful. Now, even though we're not setting it up as a network share, I do like to keep my Docker stuff in just a root Docker directory as well. This is 100% my preference. You could put this in your home directory, a hidden .docker directory, however you want to do it. But I am simply just going to make another one for Docker, which we'll be playing around with quite a bit in a minute. Now, I already have that share, the data share that has some movies and TV shows on it, and I want that to be mounted into here. And we're going to do that with our FS tab. Now, before we do that, we're going to go down here to permissions. Should probably reorganize this a little bit. And we're going to make sure that we give our user the proper permissions. And real quick, before you run that, you could always check if it's your first user, it's usually going to be 1000. Typing the ID command is how you can figure that out. But now I am simply going to paste in these commands. So I give my user full permissions to those folders and ownership. And now to actually mount that share into that data folder, we're going to come up here to network share for VM, and we're going to want to grab the tool CIFS utils. So let's go ahead and install that real quick. I already got it on here. You might not. So run that. And then from there, we're going to go into a file within the etc directory called FS tab. This is the file that, well, let's nano text editor. This is the file that controls all the mounts on your system, whether that be your actual root file system, your swap, and everything else. So I'm going to make a little comment just to keep myself organized. Remote shares, And then I'm going to go down here and just copy this one for the data directory. If we go ahead and pop that in here, you can see it's getting that data share, mounting it in data with the protocol, the user permissions, and then I'm going to have to put in my username and password. One thing though, we need to make sure that the IP address is correct. I don't think that is. So we could head over here to the little LXC that has our shared directories on it. Go to the console, and if you type a simple IPA command, get a reminder of that. It's on 33. So if I head on over here and change this to 33, that should work. And then I just need to input my username and password. And I will note, doing this just in raw text like this isn't necessarily the most recommended way. You can go ahead and create a credentials file. I'm not going to do that right now, but I will leave some information down below. So real quick, I'm going to put in my password, save it, and then Control X to close it out. So now that is in there, but we haven't really done anything with it. So for example, if I do ls data, it's just an empty directory. But if I head on over here back to our configurations, we're going to run a daemon reload for our systemctl, and then finally we can run sudo mount -all, which will mount everything within the fstab file. So there we go. Now, if I run the ls command in data, you can see we now have movies and shows, and actually got some pretty good stuff on there. Oh, there's no movies. Movies. There we go. We got some Charlie Brown, Bugs Life, Castaway, Catch Me If You Can, some good stuff. Same goes with shows. What we are going to do now is get Jellyfin up and running, and I am going to do that with Docker. So I'm going to do cd into my Docker directory, and from here I'm going to make a new directory, and I'm going to call this directory Jellyfin. This is where we're going to have our compose file and the configuration. So if I make that directory and then cd into it, this is now our current working directory, and we need to get that compose file. So let's go ahead and go over here, and we want to go to Jellyfin, and right here, compose YAML. This is the file that we are going to need. You can either download this directly or just copy and paste all this. For me, or at least for this video, I'm going to be skipping Jellystat, and I'm going to set up Jellyseer right here a little bit later. So we're just going to focus on grabbing the Jellyfin service. So let's give that a copy, head back over here, and we're going to nano into a compose.yaml file, hit enter, drop that in, and it's mostly configured all the way. So the main things you're going to want to pay attention to is the UID and the GID. These are the group IDs we saw earlier. I like to run it as my just kind of default user. So 1000 just keeps all the permissions the same everywhere. I keep 1000 no matter what. We have our time zone, our Jellyfin published URL, and I believe this was 120 if I'm not mistaken. And then right here under volumes, we have two of them. We have the configuration directory. So this / will put a config folder in our current working directory, or the directory that this compose file is in. So the location of this configuration folder for me will be under Docker, Jellyfin, config. Pretty simple. And then we just mount that data directory from our root system directly into this container as the exact same thing, data. And we keep that scheme, like I said, for all the other containers, and that really helps mitigating or removing the potential issues with our download clients. Devices, we have this for Intel Quicksync. We've already checked. The dev DRI is working perfectly fine. This is our main ports, and these are optional ports that I just usually keep them in here. So Control O, output that, Control X, and now we can run Jellyfin. So what we're going to do is first a Docker compose up. Generally, you'd want to run this with -d, but for the very first run, I like to run it just like this to make sure we don't have any issues and everything just starts up normally. So we're going to give it a minute, make sure nothing comes up, which it does look like it's done. So we're good to go. So now if I, well, first let's make sure it's on and working. So if I head over here, let's travel to 10.0.0.120.80.96. There it is. There's Jellyfin. So real quick, before I actually go through this little wizard here, I'm going to hit Control C to get out of there. It's going to stop the container, but this time I'm going to run it again with -d. So there we go. It started back up. If I refresh this, make sure it's all good, give it a minute, and there we go. Welcome to Jellyfin. So we could go next, give us a username. This is going to be Brandon. password, and then let's go next, not now. And when we add our libraries, since we mounted that data directory, if I select movies here, go to folders, we could see all it can see is the config and data. So /data, movies, okay. And you could go through here, configure everything how you prefer. The default generally is a good move. Add another one. This is going to be my shows, and this is going to be under data and shows. Click OK, click OK. And now if I hit next, we just have our language, country, region. Enable automatic port mapping, mine as well. Let's go next, and then finish. So then it's going to drop us in. We can log in just to make sure everything's showing up right. And will ya look at that. It looks absolutely beautiful. So now that we have all that set up and good to go, I'm just going to do some quick little tests to make sure the two primary things are functioning properly. First, let's go ahead and delete something. So unfortunately, let's delete a Goofy movie, probably the better one on here. So if I go boom, delete media, deleted just fine. So we know that Jellyfin has write permissions in its current directories. And now let's go ahead and test hardware transcoding. So let's go ahead and enable it real fast. Administration, dashboard. We want to go to playback, transcoding, and go with the Intel Quicksync. And the device is going to be this renderer right here. Boop, just like that. And you have a whole bunch of settings and stuff, but I'm not going to get into all of this in this video. There will be one coming, a full deep dive into Jellyfin. But we'll scroll down, keep it as is, and then click save. Got it. So now if I go back and play something, let's play some good old John Adams. Skip to a point and I can go over here, playback info. We could see it is currently transcoding. And if we actually go over here and run the Intel GPU top, boop, type in our password, we should see some action. It's busy. It's doing things. Perfect. Everything is working fine and dandy. Now, admittedly, this video is getting long. I think it's almost a half hour at this point. So I'm actually going to do all the AUR applications and all that in a separate video that if you're watching this a little bit later, it should be available to click on screen now. If you're watching it when this video first comes up, it will be a day or two. I'm going to record it right now. And of course, big thank you to you for not only watching this video, supporting the channel, subscribing, also contributing to the documentation to make everybody's life just a little bit easier when it comes to setting up all of this stuff.